I'm going to try to sit back and relax.
Oh, relax. Relax.
I never had one person that was waiting, but they're gone now.
Yeah, they're like, this is unusual. He has like a button up on and a tie. Chris doesn't have a hat on, and they have a guest. It's not the norm.
I think it'll look more like this in the future anyway, though, since we switched employers. So, no.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I won't look like
work
all the time. Yeah. I guess that's the best word for it. Is it over yet?
Let me see. Go to. Yeah, it's up.
What's up? All right. How does it look?
It's decent.
It's pretty decent. All right.
All right.
It's not horrible.
Michael Tapper. Hello. From Benton Harbor. What's going on?
What's going on? How you doing? You turn it all the way off. How's everybody doing out there?
You can really hear you. Okay.
So I'm talking loud, man, because they're complaining about the audio. If I don't.
Yeah. You might have to speak a little loud. We don't have our mics in there, so you might have to just speak up.
Okay, do I need to come forward some?
It's fine.
It's up to you.
Yeah, they'll be able to hear you.
So, Joel, introduce on who we are here with this evening.
You want to give people time to get on?
There's three of them on.
There's three of them on.
That's three of the people that want to listen.
Well, everyone say hello to Miss Becky Young. And Becky, you can say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. I know you guys are probably wondering who this is, what guest we have with us today. But we're going to get into that in a little bit here. Just waiting for a few more people to hop on here. And then we'll go ahead and get started. But she's a very special person we have here. And we actually didn't know about her, but we were introduced to her through one of our very good friends. Yeah, you can come in and say hi. Mr. Morris there. There he is. Real good guy. Real good guy. Real down there individual there. Yeah, we love him to death. But yeah, he introduced us, so we're gonna get into. She's the founder of the foundation. We're gonna get into that in a little bit here. Just wait for a couple more people to hop on. We were able to see the picture. Yeah, we were able to see who was going to be our next president-elect through their own piece. Yeah, we were able to see the picture. Don't really care. Dude, not really care.
How many we got? That's three.
Got a few people on.
That's cool though. We can proceed.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Miss Becky. She said hello, and you all have said hello. So the foundation, she is the founder of the. I want to say this wrong now. You guys catch me now, because you probably heard about the foundation. Mabopane.
That's correct.
Mabopane Foundation. And I'm in South Africa, right? We're in South Africa, the southern regions of Africa. That's where we're operating. Yeah, just want to get everything right. Want to make sure we get everything right. So yeah, she's in. I guess you can just jump in here and just tell us a little bit more about the foundation, when it started, when it, how it came about, and what your mission statement, what you're all focused on doing there.
Okay. Thank you, Joel.
No
Thank
problem.
you, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
Mabopane Foundation is a 501c3 organization, and goodness. It actually got its nonprofit status in 2003. After I met some incredible kids in 1998. Met some incredible kids living in South Africa. I was there on a mission trip, and these kids wanted to go to school desperately. Many had come from living in dumps and train stations and living in, just finding food from wherever, and they really wanted to go to school, and they were living in some of the shelters there, and they were having a hard time helping them get to school. They didn't have shoes, they didn't have clothes to go to school. There you have to have a uniform to go to public schools. So my heart was touched deeply, and came back and just knew that I had to do something. So came back, and my husband, my daughters, and I just looked through our closets and found things that we weren't using, and we had a yard sale, and we raised enough money to get a few pairs of black leather shoes so some of the kids could go to school. And from that, we had another yard sale, and from that, people in our neighborhood found out that we were raising money for some kids to be able to go to school and or buy food for them or things like that. And so I'd come home from work, and I'd find boxes and bags on my front porch, or even a piece of furniture here and there. And it was from neighbors wanting to help us by So we really didn't, I didn't go to South Africa to start a nonprofit. I didn't, this was not my goal in life, but just put people, God just put people in our paths that really wanted to be a help there. And then all of a sudden we had people that wanted to financially give, to make it possible for them to go to school. And it's small gifts, but nevertheless, we wanted to be accountable for that. And we had a means through another organization that we were able to get the financial assistance to them for about, started coming in more and more that we needed to do something. God put a very special person in my husband and in my life. This man from Morganton called us out of the blue and wanted to know if he could come pray with us and hear more about our trip to South Africa. And him and his wife came. They drove all the way from Morganton. They had dinner with us that night. We shared stories. They had also gone to South Africa many years before and just really felt God was calling them to go back. And so, we shared our hearts together that night. We prayed before they left to go back to Morganton. And lo and behold, about 7 o'clock the next morning, Greg called me and he said, Becky, I got an idea. I know you guys know that you feel like you need to start this foundation in order to be accountable. He was studying at Gardner-Webb and he said, I need to choose a thesis. Let me talk to my professor and see if I can do this for you. Started the red tape, but it was a lot of red tape. It was very difficult for my husband and I, and God just made a way. So we started just the board of directors and, just have things. We started out by helping the shelters in South Africa. And what this means is, early, in the 1998, 1999, there were really no government assistant programs or anything in South Africa. And these were just the two shelters that we helped was, it was a pastor who really wasn't an ordained pastor or anything, but he's a total man of God. And children from the streets would start following him, to hear more about God's love, and then he would feed them. And anyway, they started living in this old tire warehouse that was their church building. And then there was a mama there that was taking in children as well. And they were just shelters. It's where the police would recognize that if they found a child that was living on the streets, they could bring them. So this was the shelter life. And it was absolutely amazing through the years and helping the shelter life, the kids go to school, helping them eat better, nutritious meals, as our, what we recognized is the children, there was never any stability. Just like here in America, if a child goes through an orphanage at the age of 18, they have to get out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much schooling they've had or anything like that. And so what we found in the relationships that we built with these children, and I mean, I love them like they're my own, was at 18, many of them hadn't gone to school for 4 or 5 years of their school age life. And they weren't ready to go out. And so at the age of 17, even though they had been doing well in school, at the age of 17, they started getting worried about, in another year, they're going to be on the streets again. And what are they going to do? So anyway, our foundation, just where Yabana Village came from, was just that recognizing that they needed more than that. They didn't need just a baby bottle put in a baby's mouth. They needed us. They needed partners and parents that would go the long haul, that would help them achieve what God had purposed and planned in their life, and they couldn't just be out on their own doing that. So
that's interesting. I mean, and when we going back to your first encounter with South Africa, I guess it was that just a mission trip with the church or something which you went on, or was it just a trip or vacation or something?
Okay. Joel, I'm glad you asked that, because that is truly, I didn't seek out to go to South Africa. I didn't seek to go anywhere. I mean, I always loved hearing about mission trips. I always loved going and hearing. We had a doctor, a friend of ours, that went to India every year, and I loved hearing that, but I never saw me as a missionary. But at the age of 38, I was someone that was very insecure. I found myself, I had a wonderful husband, 2 beautiful daughters, but something had happened in my life, and it was a gradual thing. the Bible scripture tells us that Satan is here to kill, steal, and destroy. And he doesn't do it in a wide open way. You know, he does it in a very secretive way.
Right? Oh, yeah. He's cunning.
Oh. Yeah, he's very cunning. And so in my life, I don't know, I guess what happened was I was trying to be the best wife and the best mother. I was trying to be the best churchgoer. So I was saying yes to everything. And I began relying less and less on my Lord. And I found myself, my Bible was on my bedside table, and the only time I picked it up was going to church on Sunday morning. And and I found myself at the age of 38, very, very fearful. I wouldn't drive from Pittsburgh to Raleigh by myself. I needed my husband or my daughters to do everything with me. I would go to work. But even going to the grocery store, I wanted someone to go with me. And that's what had happened from leaving God out of my life. And I'll never forget the day that I hit my knees beside of my, there at my bedside table. And I opened my Bible to Psalm 63, where it says, "Oh God, you are my God. In a dry and weary land where there is no water, I thirst for you." And what I recognized then was God had never turned away from me. He just was waiting for me to turn my face towards him. And from that, I couldn't get enough of him. And so for the next 6 months, I was just reading and feeding on his word, and just, I don't know, I wanted a friendship. It was so much more than what I had ever had, and it was just a growing thing, and I wanted more and more and more of him. And then then our daughters were having a youth group meeting, and the youth pastor had told us all that the parents were invited to come that night, that they had a very special guest. So we went that night, and Pastor Reuben Mama Senior was there. Our director of missions was there, and he introduced this man, and Pastor Reuben began talking about being a street child and how he grew up, how his parents didn't want him and threw him out, and he lived with other children in the streets and in the, and how he had nothing. He even talked about not having any clothes, and that finally one man had compassion on him and gave this small boy an old trench coat. It didn't have any buttons. He talked about his hands being his buttons and on his coat. Wow. It didn't have anything underneath. But then he went on, and he fast forwarded, and he talked about how someone gave him a Bible, and how he began reading this Bible, and he was introduced to God, and how God came in and transformed his life. And I'm just taking this in, because very similar to me, God's word just transformed me. And he began talking about then how the children would follow him and coming near him. And so I think I've made a long story here, but really with this, it just, okay, so I'm going to tell you the part that is just incredible. So I heard Pastor Reuben, and I wanted to run up to him. I wanted to run up to him and hug him and say, "How can I help you? What can I do to help you?" But I was still so insecure with doing anything without my husband. He was beside of me. I thought I better wait. And so I didn't even introduce myself to this pastor. We got in the car. My daughter stayed along for youth. We got in the car, and my husband asked me, I asked my husband, I said, "Stanley, is God calling you to go to South Africa?" And he said, "Absolutely not." So when he said that, I thought, well, surely God.
Okay, yeah, not me.
Yeah. Not without my husband.
Yeah.
And so I little tears sprang to my eyes. I mean, it hurt, because I really thought that God was calling me during that encounter with Pastor Reuben. So for about I didn't breathe another word to anyone for about 3 months. I just, I thought, God, how did I hear you so wrong? I really, and it was 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. I would wake up, and I would see these very faces that Pastor Reuben had talked about, these children that were following him. And I still longed to reach out and hug them and tell them that I loved them, and that God loved them even more. And so I knew God was doing something in my life. But I kept saying to God, this is so ridiculous. God didn't need me to go. He could do anything, anywhere, with anyone. But I kept saying to him, "Okay, God, I hear you. So as soon as you call my husband, I'm ready to go." So, work on his heart. So work on his heart, and I'll go. And so 3 months later, and so it was a total of 6 months. And we had my daughter from Campbell University had come home. My daughter from Northwood was with us. We were celebrating my husband's birthday together with his mom in Raleigh. We were coming back to Pittsburgh late that night, and my husband was in the car, and I all of a sudden tears started running down my face, and he's looking at me and all, and it was like I was going to burst. So I turned to my daughters, who knew nothing about our conversation before, and I said, "Girls, isn't God calling one of you to go to South Africa?" And they said, "No, Mama, He's not." And then I looked at Stanley and I said, "Stanley, please tell me God is calling you to go with me to South Africa." And he said, "No, Becky, He's not. But it's obvious He is you, and it's time that you listen." And so God was already working in his heart. And he asked me questions I couldn't answer. He asked me, where will you go? Who will you go with? How much would it cost? And the only thing I could tell him is it would not hurt our family. It just won't hurt. I can't answer any of your questions. So he asked me that night, he said, "What is the director of missions name that came that night with," and I couldn't think of his name. And he said, "Well, I tell you what, why don't we contact him on Monday morning after the weekend? We'll call the church office, find his name, get in touch with him, sit down with him, and get some questions answered." So I agreed. Well, at church on Sunday morning, we go into Sunday school class together, and the title of our lesson that week was, "Will you go if God calls?" And it was like the whole time God was just speaking to me through that class, through even the participants that were in the class. And Stanley and I were sitting there in the class together, holding hands, just knowing God is really speaking to us, and we know that this is true and real. Well, he gets out to go to the choir room with my with one of my prayer sisters at that time that I had not breathed a word about this, because at the time I was waiting for God to call Stanley before I shared it. And so he goes into the choir room, and unbeknown to me, he told Cindy what we had talked about the night before, and that we needed to contact our director of missions and get some questions answered. So I go on into the sanctuary, then the choir comes on. My prayer sister's at this end and my husband's at this end of the choir, and I noticed when they're looking at me, they're very baffled. It's like what's wrong with her or something. It was just this, and they were looking at each other and communicating something I didn't know what they were communicating about. So the service went on, and our pastor David began preaching and all, and it was exactly the same thing. It's, are you listening? Are you really listening to God? And I found myself at the front of the church, and if you had known me back then, I would not have ever gotten in front of the church for any reason. I was so afraid. Yeah. And but I found myself at the front of the church, and I grabbed hold of him and I said, "Please pray for me. I know I'm going to South Africa. I just don't know when or how or anything, but please pray." And he prayed for me, and I remember getting back to my seat, and I was holding on to the pew just to keep from falling. I thought, what have you done? What have you done? You're supposed to get questions answered here. You've told the pastor you're going to South Africa. I wouldn't even look at my husband. And at that time, he said, "I'd like to call on someone very special to close us in prayer." He said, "I'd like to call on our director of missions, Reverend Roy Smith." And the thing about that, in all the years we had been going to that church, that's the only two times, maybe one other time early in our going, that he had even been to our church.
Oh, wow.
When he began praying, I could feel his breath on my neck. He was right behind me. So where Stanley and I couldn't think of his name, he recognized the man. Cindy knew the man, that he's right behind me. So when he finished praying, I turned around and I stuck out my hand and I said, "You don't know me, but my name is Becky Young and I'm going to South Africa." And he said, "Becky, that's great. We have a team that's leaving in just 3 months." And this was the team that I went on to the very place that I had heard this pastor, to Mabopane, South Africa, where I had heard this preacher preaching.
Oh, wow.
That is
powerful. So I say that to give God all the glory.
Amen.
You know, and truly what I'd like to share with anyone here is, I did then, and I guess it was probably a couple of years in going. You know, I said a second ago, God didn't need me to go, but he wanted to take me by the hand to show me something incredible. He wanted to, number one, I think, to show me that when our priorities get out of line, when we put my husband and my family first, church next, and God after that, it doesn't work. And we get things all messed up like I did. And so I had to get and that's something that I struggle with today, because I don't want this ministry, this Mabopane Foundation, to ever get in front of or taking priority away from my God.
Amen.
Because I will make a mess of things.
We all will. We all do.
Wow, but John, that is very powerful.
That is.
Anybody who's just hopping on or just coming in, if you have any questions this is Becky here, insight of things that you want to help out with, then just chime in and let us know. So,
I'm sure to answer my biggest question that I had that we were debating asking.
I can't.
But it's already been answered already.
No,
the reason why I was wondering why would you go all the way to Africa? Don't take this the wrong way, but go to Africa and but there's people over here to help. But you go to Africa. But if God calls you to Africa, I ain't got nothing to say.
And I'm asked that question a lot, and it's a very hard question to answer, because there's a lot of needs here. Mm-hmm. But when God calls you and shows you the needs of another place, you have to listen. You have to be obedient.
Amen.
And I will forever be grateful.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. I say everybody can't. You're only one person, so if that's your place. Somebody else's place is to do it over here. So it's.
Yeah, and that leads into something else that I look at as well, because then you think about resources and different things that aren't available there that may be available here, and that people here may have access to that they can present to those in a different location. Yeah. So looking at that, since you've been there, could you tell us a little bit more about the economic system, the way things work down there, how things operate in that region, South Africa?
I'll do my best. Mm-hmm. It is a very poor area that our village is in, Yabana Village. Yabana Village for the Children. It's actually a township called Winterveld, South Africa. Mm-hmm. And it's within the Mabopane area there.
Okay.
But even to this day, there's government funding available, but we started Yabana Village in 2006, and there's not been any assistance given to the village. There's needs all over their country, and so they're spread thin. So it's very hard to get the help that is needed right there. So, the village itself is now we have grown to participants in South Africa, in Pretoria, that are helping, ministry partners and all that are helping us some small churches that are helping us some. But the majority of the funding comes from the Mabopane Foundation, which is actually in Apex, North Carolina, where our foundation and our mission house is. Okay. That's where we continue the mission sales, and we call them our pop-up sales, our mission pop-up sales. And but there in South Africa, it's difficult. College costs about the same there as it does here.
Okay.
But yet jobs are scarce, and there's a lot of unemployment, so it's very difficult for young people to get any kind of education. College sometimes is totally out of the question. Yeah. Where you might have a child that has given us good water that's not contaminated and able to to supply water for our village there. What other things?
Well, that's just one of the big things I was wondering about, because I know, especially in recent news, I guess you can say, people are hearing a lot about South Africa, but of course, the media can't catch everything, and even different media outlets that we look into, they can't catch everything that's going on in South Africa. So we just see certain things that's going on down there with certain people who've been run out of certain areas, different things like that going on. And I was just wondering if you all have been exposed to that. And I guess too, looking at it, you said it's a poor area. The children that you all, I guess, house, so to speak, are they children that are exposed to a lot of, I guess, criminal activity and whatnot going around, or is it just children that may have grown up without parents or whatnot?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture. We have some orphans. We have some vulnerable children. Some that have been neglected or abandoned. They may have parents somewhere, but we don't know where they are. But our children are all given to us through the court system. So it's a legal, permanent placement of children.
Okay.
We're not seeking, we're not going to the train station.
Picking them up or anything.
That was my next question. Like, how do the kids get there?
These are all children that have been deemed by the courts that need help. Need a place to stay.
Okay. Nice.
Gotcha.
Wow.
All right. Yeah, so that's just some one thing that really popped up in my mind because, like I said, it's been a lot of talk about South Africa and everything's going on there. So I was just wondering.
There's a lot of farms that are being taken over. The farms aren't in our area so much as in another territory. They're really looking closely at that, but that's not touched that much in the area that we are. You know, the biggest thing is, I guess, crime and poverty, which I think goes hand in hand many times.
Well, a lot of the time, to an extent.
I mean, it's like my husband said years ago. He said, you know, Becky, who's to say if I have children that are starving to death, that I'm not going to go in and steal the lumber from the Yabana village in order to sell it to buy my dying baby. I mean, my husband said, I don't think I could pass up that piece of lumber. You know, if it meant saving the child.
Yeah.
I think one of the most beautiful parts. A lot of people ask me all the time. So, do you take mission trips to South Africa? Do you recruit mission trips to go to South Africa? One of my favorite books is called When Helping Hurts, and it made me realize many years ago. Mission trips, I have nothing against them. I don't want to speak badly about them, but when that trip hurts instead of helps, you got to really look at it. You know, are you going for the right reasons? Are you going just to be patting yourself on the back or I'm going to South Africa? So we have to look very carefully at that, and I'd really love to hear someone's heart. If they truly feel called to go to our village to get help, then I know God will use them in mighty ways. But what we try to do in South Africa is we raise up everywhere from our teachers to our security to all of our staff, our mothers. We look for local people. And so if I had a contracting team coming from America to come build one of the houses, if we had 5 people, that would be $10,000 basically for them to travel there, stay a week. They couldn't even get the cement down because we build with cement mostly. Before it's time to go back home again. So what can we do with that money instead? Not that we get it from the contractors, but so instead what we do is we look to the community and we raise up men and women, our teachers, everyone. I mean, many of our teachers, our beginning teachers, actually gave up every Saturday of their lives to be trained for 1 year to come teach at the preschool. You know, they wanted a job. They wanted to work with children. Our security, one of our security officers was so precious to me a few years ago. Lucy had been working with us. But he came to me and he shared with me, he said, Mama Becky, you will never know. He said, when Yabana offered me training in security to come be a security officer for this village, I was looking in dustbins, which are trash cans. I was looking in dustbins trying to find food to feed my wife and baby.
Oh, wow.
And so we can do so much more with the funding there than we can with teams going over and then coming back and going about their everyday life and patting themselves on the back.
And that gives a whole new meaning too to it when we say, you know, charity begins at home, because a lot of times we look at, just here in America, I mean, we look at individuals, because like what you're offering them is opportunity within their own community to actually be able to bring their own, you know, their own people up. So it's very empowering in that sense, and you give them the opportunity to do that. It's a lot more powerful than someone else coming over and then you struggling to try to, like I said, get people to come over and build them up when you have people there that actually want to work and do things. And this is the faces that they're seeing on a regular basis anyway, so they know them is easy to build rapport and they're able to help in their own community. So it's home based. So it's powerful. It's powerful.
It's into them. I mean, we've got Yup. Yup was a white Afrikaans man who had retired. He was a contractor. He came to our village and he told us, he said, I can build it. I can, but he said, let me give you 6 months of my time. But you find me, in the meantime, you find me a local person that knows something about building houses, and you bring him here. So he spoke Swana as well. So he would be in Shadrach is the man. Shadrach.
Just give me a me shaking in the vinegar.
That's right. So he had a wife and 2 children and he didn't have employment. And so he came in under Yup, and Yup trained him and taught him everything he knew. So that Yup empowered Shadrach to do all of the plastering, every aspect of the building and to this day, Shadrach comes to that village with his head held high.
Wow.
And he knows that he has built that village, that God enabled him and entrusted this big job for him to do. And from that, he's trained other people to come in. He's taught other people. So now they can go out and raise money for their children so their children don't wind up in an orphanage or somewhere else.
Nice. I think we had someone says, Ian says, he says, my son's name is Shadrach. That's very cool.
I love that name.
That's a good name. That's a really good name. I don't even know what it means, but it's a good name. Yeah, so going back to the village and talking about the kids, so how many now, I guess looking at how many kids are you all helping?
Okay. Well, we have 7 houses. Our 8th house has just been built. They're like cluster houses. They're very small houses with 6 to 8 children and a house mom living there. And so we currently have 48. I sometimes hesitate telling numbers, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Working with the shelters many times, I would come back. I travel over there twice a year. I bake butter pound cakes and fresh frozen strawberry pies to pay for my trips to go.
That sounds good.
But so when I go to the shelters, it would be 75 kids this year, and then 6 months later there'd be 100 kids, and so we were actually helping. Then all of a sudden we were back to square one and not really able to provide a lot of good food or nourishing food. We were having to go back to just pop, because it was so many mouths. Many times I recognized that people didn't even know the children's names. It was boy, girl, boy, girl.
Oh, wow.
And it just kind of broke my heart that they were individuals, they had names, and thinking they would get government funding. The more children we get, the more children we get.
Oh.
And that's one reason Yabana's name is why it is. It's for the children. So when you ask me how many, I kind of hesitate because I can tell you their names, and I can tell you how old they are, and I can tell you what they want to be when they grow up.
Wow.
But I hesitate telling how many we have at that village. Now our school has 166 kids going there, and this is from the local community. I'll have to tell you the story on that. So Karina is our volunteer executive director. That she's there on a weekly basis, and then we have our staff that runs Yabana and all. But Karina, back in the early days, before we had much of a staff, we had 2 teachers that were teaching our kids. We built our classroom for our little kids to go to give them a head start, a jump start. And all of a sudden, she called me one day, and she said, Becky, she was almost in tears. She said, I don't know what to do. Puss Alexa has called me and said that, she said, we've got 30 children sitting outside our doors with one mom from the community begging. The mom is begging, please, our kids need teaching too. Won't you please let them in? She said, what are we going to do? I said, I guess God is just telling us to build another classroom. So right now we have 166 kids from the local community that go to school, get 2 well-balanced meals there a day, and Christian education.
That's huge. And just like, I guess, per capita, like, what does Mabopane look like as far as the people living there? The number, is that?
Yeah. I don't do numbers well.
Okay.
That's
another one.
No, I'm going to say I just don't.
Population, right? Yeah.
Population. I really need to look that up sometime. But I mean, I know a long time ago it was over 1 million people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not think.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it.
Me neither.
And like I said, they have to use most of them have to use the public train.
Yeah, they don't have.
So if an individual from Mabopane is going to Pretoria where you get work, this is what it consists of. I know this just because I participated with it. We had 2 of our students that were going to go to pop up in the city. This was to help build them, to help teach life skill training and computer courses. Well, it was twice a week, so they had to get on the bus. I mean, on the train. So right there in Mabopane, it just really laid heavy on my heart. Wait a minute. Oh, and one of the things that was told to them, if they're late, if they're past the 8 o'clock time, they're not going to be allowed to go.
Really?
So huge things. And I didn't know how the train system worked. I heard nightmares about it, but I didn't really know. So I asked the village father, could I go with them? And he first said no. He said, it's too dangerous. And I said, but we have to see what kind of challenges they face. You know, if they're late, if they're whatever, you know, we just have to know and just not send them on their own. So I just begged him to please let me go. Well, he couldn't drive me, so one of our administrative assistants drove us that morning. Well, we get going, and what it was George had another thing to do, the village father, and he had not given the two boys their transport money to buy their train ticket. And our administrative assistant didn't have it. So there, I had a little bit of rand on me, so I was able to buy our 3 tickets. So that was challenge number 1.
The currency, right?
They wouldn't have rand. That's right.
Okay.
So they would not have been able to get to class that day. They would have been their opportunity shot.
Wow.
So that was one. And then and I'm seeing these masses of people just pouring in there. And they had made me put my pocketbook in a plastic bag, and one of the boys was carrying it. And so we're there, and we're getting closer to the train, and I'm just seeing hundreds and hundreds of people frantically trying to get up towards the line that you stood at. So we get up there, and when the doors opened to the train, it was like a huge push from behind, and I found myself just being pushed into the train. My arms ended up being up like this, really, literally, just where I was pushed. The boys beside of me, they just really made sure they stayed beside of me. And I found myself, my face was to someone else's head, and here we were just pushed in like sardines.
Wow.
And it was there that I realized, and even the doors wouldn't shut entirely because people were hanging on. The train took off with them hanging on, the doors not shut.
Oh, wow.
And this is what I realized then. Was every one of these men, women, and young students, they had a place that they had to be on time, okay? And they were frantic because they knew that their jobs could end, or their opportunities at school could end if they're late, just like our 2 students. Well, then all of a sudden, there's no communication on their trains. So all of a sudden the train starts slowing down. I said, are we there yet? And they said, no, you know, it would have to take, longer than this. And there's a platform, and we're told that the doors open and we all have to get out. And the train leaves us. And we're standing on a platform. There's no other train there. It's not a train station. It's just out in the middle of nowhere, this great big platform. And another train comes about 20 or 30 minutes later, and we get on, same way, a giant push, we get in, and we finally get to Pretoria. Then we have to walk blocks and blocks and blocks to get to this place that's offering these pop-up classes. Wow. So we were 9 o'clock before we got there.
Ooh.
Had I not been there, our students would have been turned away and said, you don't, but because I was able to tell them what they experienced and the trains don't run any earlier than 5 o'clock, so we got on the earliest. But I guess what I'm saying, every single person is dependent on that.
Yeah, that system of transportation.
They're fired because they're an hour late repeatedly, but it's totally out of their hands.
Yeah, there's nothing they can do. So the people there in, Pretoria?
Pretoria is the city.
Yeah, the city. The people there, they really don't take that into consideration.
They drive their cars. They live in the houses that are close by.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I guess that's the reason, and this is another thing that I find really cool. You know, there's a devotion in Proverbs 31. I can't tell you exactly who wrote it or anything, but it talks about someone going on a mission trip and, what did they gain from that? And it's the power of prayer. When you're there in South Africa and you're with the children and you're with the moms and the staff and everything, and they're praying their hearts out. They're praying and they're believing into God. They're already thanking Him for what He is doing in their prayers. That we believe that you're going to give us what we need to eat today. And
all right, we're back. We just YouTube kicks every once in a while, so we're back.
Yeah, we're back. It kicks off every now and then. But once again, for those who may have just once again been joining us, this is Ms. Becky Young, founder of the Mabopane Foundation down in Africa, South Africa. She's just been giving us a little insight on the foundation, telling us a little bit about the story and
how Africa works.
And how Africa works.
It's crowded.
It's very crowded. Just finished talking about a little bit about transportation and some of the struggles that they face there. So we're just going to continue and resume. Right? I don't think we stopped you.
I think we did.
We did stop you.
No, we're good.
Okay, I have a question. Do you have any problems with like the parents of any of the children?
Not typically. Everything we are required to have a social worker at our village.
Okay.
And our social worker works if there's children that are going to be reunited with parents, you know, after some work has been done and everything. They do in-house. They're with the parents. They're with the children. You know, it's quite beautiful.
Okay.
No, I would say very seldom do we have problems. Very seldom.
Okay. That's good.
That is good. Because this is one thing I was wondering too, where it had, was there any type of, I know I talked about earlier, I asked a question about, you know, the area, was the area there, you know, any crime or anything like that there, but I was wondering if there were any cases where that had came into the village. Yeah. Or any.
No, we've been so blessed. We did a prayer circle around the village many years ago. We did have some problems in the early days before we had the actual gate up. We had the fence around the property, but before we got the gate up, we had some incidences. And I came, and George, the father, and I, and all the staff, and all the children and mothers and everything, we actually did a prayer circle, and we walked the entire premises just praying and asking God to wrap His loving arms around us and to protect us. And through riots, and I mean, there's many times that the children can't go to school because there's riots all throughout the streets and burning and all of that. But praise God, you know, we stay. Many times they'll tell you not to even come out of your house because it's so dangerous. So we'll stay in our houses and kind of stay low. And but there's not been incident. You know, we've had a couple of break-ins. You know, that's unfortunate. I guess when we started our solar project, we were without electricity. We had electricity when we first started the village, but because you know, electricity is not something everyone has out there. Many people. So I don't know exactly how to explain this, but there would be some transformers, and then the people in the community would tap into those those things, and it's actually called. It's stealing the electricity, you know, to make sure they had on light. And again, I don't judge them because, you know, can you imagine what one light bulb in a totally dark house would do for you? You know?
Yeah, sure.
So, but what was happening? It was burning. It was blowing up the transformers.
Yeah.
And so we lost power, and as a result of that, the power company, would not redo they had replaced the transformers repeatedly, and they kept.
We're not doing it.
You're at fault.
Right. So we were 2 years with no power, and really bit So you can imagine raising 6 to 8 children in a house with no power. You have candles.
You all had multiple houses still at that point in time too, right?
And I, you know, when I was there, I would have to light a candle, you know, in order to see, and but it was the moms, you know, that we felt so no hot water for baths or anything like that, and we just really felt their heartbeat. So we started looking into solar, and we're still, you know, it's a very new thing in South Africa, so we've had some challenges with it. But we're doing it where solar is going to be our primary, and Eskom has come back somewhat, but we're going to have that as our secondary, and the entire village will be on solar power.
Nice.
So when we first started putting those in, some of our solar panels were stolen, you know, and I'm sure sold, but we're trying to install them in ways now that they can't taken out.
Take them, at least without you all knowing.
It's kind of a living learn situation there.
Yeah, awesome. So like your water source, I know you mentioned earlier, like is it like from is there a river nearby or something? A stream?
No, we received funding from an individual here, and then we drilled several wells. We have several wells for irrigation only, but one well is a really good well, and it's it's not contaminated. So we have a system there where we have a pump that pumps it. It's solar, and it pumps it up into this big reservoir tank. We have 4 tanks. And that operates the entire village.
Nice. Okay. That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal. That took us years to get to that point.
Wow.
Cool.
So earlier you mentioned as far as getting there you mentioned pies or cakes or something, right?
Yes.
I love cakes and pies.
I should have brought you one.
Yeah, I would have loved that. Yeah, I would have definitely funded the next trip there because I love pies. So is that you just do that to fund your trip to go there the 2 times a year that you go?
That's right. That's right. So I went in 1998 and 1999, and my church family helped me go that year. In 1999, I knew I was going back. It wasn't a one-time thing. And a friend of mine, a very long-time friend of our family's, has a strawberry farm. And she asked me if I would make my delicious butter pound cakes, and she would sell them for me at her strawberry farm during strawberry season. So from that, I started making butter pound cakes, and it did. And always to this day, I think it takes about 250 butter pound cakes baked during a 6-week period and sold during a 6-week period. And then I started making fresh frozen strawberry pies. She donated the strawberries. I bought the other ingredients, and we would sell them. Now I have a friend, a ministry partner, that is actually making the pies for me to help me with my husband's trip. But nice. Yes, that way, for all these years, for almost, well, this will be 21 years in April since I went to South Africa and have been going every year. Our foundation started in 2003. We've never had any paid staff. It's all been, including myself, it's all been volunteer based. My husband and I live very simply. We live in a little tiny house, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and drive old cars. And I don't say that, that's just, God wanted the assistance before the children. It has been recently, I will share with you, our foundation has grown, and we've got a lot of volunteers working for us. I guess total, probably close to 70 volunteers that touch us in different ways. Some only once a year, our CPA that does our taxes and all, but many volunteers. But because it has grown like it has with our sales there at the house in Apex, my hours have gotten longer and longer, and I'm not getting any younger. So many times 10 and 12-hour days, 6-7 days a week. Wow. And God heard my cry. I had always thought that He was going to raise up someone that would also be able to, have the means to be able to do this with no salary. And that had been my prayer for 3 years. Lo and behold, last November, a year ago this past November, we had ministry partners that texted me one night and said that they would like to provide the salary of a manager to relieve some of, because between being the manager out at the mission house and executive director and a lot of work, a lot of hours. So, it's just been incredible. We did our interviews this year. We just hired our first manager. She starts February 4th. And when I look back at it, I'm going, gosh, our God is so awesome. Jenny is a young girl. She's 33 years old with a lot of retail experience, a lot of manager's experience. But she's single, and how could she possibly come and be our manager without some type of compensation? So God knew that back whenever He provided the wonderful, generous donation to provide her salary. That still makes it to where 100% of what's sold at the mission house and what's donated through contributions still reaches our children. Wow. Even our mission house there in Apex, it's a beautiful place, and almost 6 acres of land was all donated. We've never had to pay rent. We've never had to pay for our space. Even our power and everything is provided. There's always someone that comes up once a year and just gives us a check and says this is to be used for mission house expenses. And we've never had to ask for, we've never had to recruit, we've never had to take money from the sales or contributions to do any of those things.
That's God led right there. That's really
for sure.
Divine intervention. So kind of back to the question I asked leading up to this. With you using that money that you're getting, from you said the pies or whatnot that you're selling, what kind of led you to go that route, or is it because it's just kind of like a decision that was made for you, or is it something that you just decided to do versus going from, I guess, church to church, knocking and saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" And because I know a lot of people in like missions. I'm not saying it's wrong or whatnot to do it, but I see a lot of people in churches, they're just going in. And not saying they're begging, but sometimes it does seem like they're on the side of begging. Like you said earlier about it needs to be something that God is leading you to do, not just to be able to say, "Yeah, I want to go on the trip after just so I can get a pat on the back." So is that something like what led you to do it that route versus going the route of just going from church to church, trying to get donations to fund you going?
Yeah. Joel, that's a good question. That's something that my daughters and I were very involved in raising funds for other organizations during their high school years. You know, we worked together and we raised funds for other organizations. And it wasn't until Melissa went off to Campbell that I began researching one of the places that we were helping. And when I began researching this, I realized, I actually found out, and it was very sad to me, that only pennies actually reached the children that we were helping. That it was paying salaries and buildings here in America.
Really?
Large salaries and large buildings. And that gave me a bad taste. I mean, it really gave me a bad taste. You know, and this was even done through our church, unbeknown to them. They didn't know it either, you know, but we were doing this through our church. So I think God opened my eyes for me to see this in advance so that we would not let that happen to our foundation. And I think that's why, you know.
Dirty thieves. See what happens? Step in the church. They're going to get you. Wow, that's, you know, I guess they would kind of like, you know, turn you off. And the reason I really asked that, because that seems like a more, we're kind of entrepreneur minded, but that seems more of of the right way to do it. You know, you do it on your own as an independent way to do it. You know, you feel like, and that's more so depending on God to me. Like, God, you called me to do this. I know you'll provide a way to do it. And that's your way to do it. He put this person in your path that at a strawberry farm or whatever, and then you met up and they getting deposits. It's like divine intervention once again, you know.
That's right.
Instead of just being like, you know, I need to go. Oh, I know they got money. Let me go over here and get my. You know, it's God. It's like He's gonna make a way, and I'm trusting Him to make a way, and He provided for you to do it. You know?
Even in, and I'll have to say the majority of our funding doesn't come from huge donations, other than, you know, we have received those, you know, but the majority of our funding is from ordinary people, you know, that give $25 a month or $50 a month.
Yeah, just regular.
And it's forever. It's God has touched their heart in such a way that even though they really can't afford it, they want to help these children for the benefit of these children that live at Yabana Village. And to me, that is just such a beautiful thing when God touches a heart. We have one couple that's been giving, I'm telling you, probably since 2003, because that's when we did our first banquet, and they've been given $15 a month. That's what you call sustainability. You can count on. That may seem like, you know, well, gosh, I go to McDonald's and I spend that. But that $15 is a lifeline to our ministry because we know that we can count on it every single month.
Yep, that's residual. It's always.
Oh, yeah. That's powerful. Yeah. So since 2003, right?
That's right, when we got our nonprofit status.
When you got the status, but before then you still were working, you know, working on it. So how long has that been?
That's been, it'll be 21 years in April.
21 years in April. Oh, wow. That's a long time. I'm only 26, so I'm still.
Don't do the math.
We're not gonna do that. I'm still in the
man, so you ain't gotta worry about it.
But guys, this place, South Africa, is a beautiful place. A lot of people will ask me, if you love these children so much, why don't you just adopt them? Why didn't you just adopt them in the beginning and bring them here? And I'll have to say to you there, I didn't want to Americanize these kids. I love my children, but they have so much, and they want so much, and it's me, myself, and I in our culture and all. And you know, when I see our children praying and believing in God in South Africa, that to meet their needs and to meet our needs. Just recently, we had a young girl, a teenage girl, who in our circle of prayer now at nighttime, every single night, our village gets together. The mothers and children and the village father, and even our manager and our social worker. They get together every single night, and they come together for 30 minutes, and they circle one little tiny room in one of the cluster houses. And they get together and they start praying. And over there, it's so beautiful because they pray out loud. So whatever language they are praying in, it's their language, and they're praying out loud to God. And so I'm praying in English, but all of a sudden I hear one of our young girls, our teenage girls, start praying. She had found out about a hurricane that was to hit our coast of North Carolina. I had told her about how severe it was. And Stanley had told me what the governor had said, already declaring a state of emergency, already the forecast of it was to be such a severe, one of the biggest storms ever, the Category 5, and that there was no chance it was going to move. It was just so, and I had shared this. I said, so please pray. I'm that far away from my family, and I just need their prayer support. So here I'm hearing this little 13-year-old girl over there praying in English, and she's praying to a God who is able. She's saying, God, I know that you can move mountains. So despite what the forecast says, despite what the governor says, Lord, we know you can move this storm. We know that you can bring it down, decrease it in size. And then she said this, and this is what was so beautiful. I thank you, God, in the name of Jesus, for already doing that. I thank you, God, that you are working in this storm. And she said, and I hope and I pray that every person living in North Carolina will recognize you and recognize your hand. Wow. She began praying for our Mabopane Foundation, our volunteers, my family, everyone in specific, that God would save them and to keep their property safe. And do you know, my husband called me the next morning. I had called him that night and I said, I want you to call our daughters. I want you to tell our granddaughters that God is moving in this storm. Not to be fearful, not to be afraid, but to start praising him for what he is doing. Yes, it was bad. Yes, it was devastating. Yes, a lot of people lost. But I'm telling you, he moved that storm. He decreased the Category 5. I think it came in at like a little below a 4.
Yeah, it was like a 3 or something. Yeah, it was 2 by the time it hit. But it was like,
and our mission house was saved. There wasn't a single volunteer that lost any of their property or any of their lives or anything like that. And that's the kind of, I want these kids. Why would I bring them to America where all they have to do, if they're praying for bread, they run and get it themselves. If they pray for, God, we need electricity. All our room is, we lost power, but then moments later our power comes on.
We really,
it's
you
hard
start
to
taking
trust when it's like that. When it's that easy.
We
trust factor goes.
We actually, many times, we provide our own answers to our prayers. I'm hungry. Let me go to the refrigerator
and check it out.
And see what a smorgasbord we can make.
We take it for granted much.
We do.
And it is a, I won't say it's a bad question to ask. You said some people ask that question, why don't you just bring her in? I guess it is a legitimate question to ask, but it is a small way of looking at things. I guess when you're looking at the bigger picture of why not let them, where they are
in their home,
and raise up godly. What
we
want to do is raise up godly men and women. We want to raise them up in a way that they believe in a God who is able. They can become the government leaders, making much better government decisions. They can be the ones that are teaching their children in classrooms. We've got a young man, 2 young men now from our youth transition living center. They are in school to become teachers. So these are godly men and women that are raising up to the calling that God has put on their lives, and they're going to make a difference in their country. Why would I want to bring these beautiful young people to be here? I want them to be there,
the leaders.
Exactly.
And then not forgetting where they came from and being sustainability to the village that raised them up in years to come. We had a beautiful thing that happened with one of the shelter kids from years back. He recognized where his help came from, and he's such a beautiful young man. He didn't get the opportunity of college. He could have done it easily, but he got computer training. So he got a job with that Mozambique Outer Beltline. It was a temporary job, 2-year job, but he did great. He was on work. He was at work on time. He performed well. He did the best of his ability. He really raised up to the challenge before him. And so his boss, when the 2-year partnership ended, his boss reached out and shared this young man with someone else. So he got another job. Well, he walked from the bottom up, and he raised himself up to the very top, was given a position in Pretoria, which is very close to our village. And he said, one of these days, Mama Becky, we're going to be able to help. Our company's going to be able to help. And do you know, this year we had a matching grant offered here in the States, and we put it out to South Africa as well. And Solly and his company gave $6,000 towards that matching grant.
Oh, wow.
So this was one of the kids that was helped back in 1998, 1999, 2000 is now giving back.
Oh, wow.
So again, why would I want to come and Americanize them here?
Exactly.
When they can make such a change in their beautiful, beautiful
their
country.
Home there.
Oh, yeah.
That is powerful. Yeah. But and what you were saying earlier about the girl, praying or even things going on over here in America, the storm's coming here, and she's praying. Yeah. Like that is, that's deep because she's actually praying for people that's outside of her own country.
Exactly.
So, you hard-headed Americans, she pray for you. You pray for you. No, this is messing. But that is powerful though.
But yeah, she prayed for us. And she believed in God. I mean, to thank Him.
You didn't like my presentation? Was it the wrong accent?
I think it was.
It was the wrong accent. How is it supposed to be?
That's okay. No, we're past that now.
We gotta get it right. Because I want to ask about the what's the primary, like, the language in the foundation? Like, because I know you said they're coming from different places as well. So
yeah.
What's like the primary language that you're getting when you for the kids that need a volunteer?
Okay. So they may come in speaking different languages, but it's primarily Swana. And English.
Swana and English.
Yes. We're asking the moms to really talk more in English, not wanting to forget Swana. We want the children to always speak it and know it well, but because English will open doors for them in the universities and all. We really want them to be fluent in English by the time they get to college. But yes, Swana is the primary language.
Swana.
You speak Swana?
No. I speak a little bit of Swana.
Okay.
But
she taught me something with Dumela.
That's right.
Dumela.
It's a little late for that.
I know, right? She did teach you that though.
I think if I had gone younger, I could have taken it on. Yeah. We have a young girl that goes over and spends 3 months every year at our village. And she has picked it up very nicely, but she was in her late 20s when she went. Okay. I think that makes a huge difference.
Wow. Yeah, the age, learning. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So I think, I don't know. Have we gone through everything? Got any more questions?
I think we've covered pretty much everything.
I do want to ask you this, because this is like, I mean, you've given us a lot of information thus far, and you told us a lot, but it seems like a lot on your shoulders. This is a lot of work that you've been doing and taking on yourself. So how, I guess I just asked you, how do you do it? It seems like, but people that...
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's my prayer each and every day.
Yes, and she answers. So, that's her answer to the question. So you all are wondering, like, how is she doing all of this? And that is her answer.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is the boundaries on my life. I have my husband, I have my 2 beautiful daughters, my son-in-laws, and now my 3 beautiful granddaughters, and making time for them. That's a priority in my life. And also my church. I love my church, and I just don't want to get my priorities wrong.
Amen. That is important. Priorities is definitely important. So I guess before we wrap up here, I mean, you can let the people know, because that once this goes out, other people are going to be getting on and watching it and seeing it. So we want to actually leave them, I guess, we're going to leave a link, definitely, but I guess you can let them know where they can go to kind of support. And if they want to give any donations or anything or help out in any way, I guess you can give out any website or any information, like locations of the foundation, like you said, the Apex. So just any information that you can give.
Okay.
Out.
Well, we do have a mission house in Apex, North Carolina. It's at 3913 US Highway 64 West in Apex. We have a drop-off location there that you can drop off things for our sales. You can also come shop with us. We have sales there twice a month. We have it the second weekend of every month, Friday and Saturday. And you can get this information also on our, and then also the last weekend of every month. But you can go to our website and get all of this, and it's at www.Mabopane Foundation, MabopaneKids.org. So not Mabopane Foundation, it's MabopaneKids.org. So, and then we also have a link to our Yabana village there too, that you can go and learn more about the village.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put all those links in the description below under this video. And any donation that you were going to give to the HayesBrothers, you can make sure you can give to the Mabopane Foundation instead there. So, well, this is Becky Young. We appreciate you coming and sitting down with us. Before we go, did you all see this back here? This is a picture of Miss Becky and one of the children here. Do you care to explain or talk about this picture a little bit?
That was probably in about 2000, so it's many years ago.
About 2000
and we won't show it too close up.
I see. Oh, nice picture, right? I like it. I think it's nice. 2000.
Some very special kids.
Definitely. So just know that there are things going on in the world outside of what's going on in America. There are individuals that need help outside of what's going on in America. So I know we kind of get closed-minded a lot of times with a lot of things that we hear going on here. Yeah, well, we'll get to it, but here's one individual here who's actually taking out her time and her life to actually spread love in different areas of the world. So, help them out. We got some links and stuff, so we're going to put them down there in the description below. Once again, Ms. Becky Young, we appreciate you coming out and hanging with the Hayes-Brothers on this evening.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, sir.
So very
He's
much.
over there. You can't see him, but he's over there.
All right, y'all have a blessed night.
Have a blessed night. Appreciate y'all checking in with us. Y'all have a good one, all right?